Hello and welcome to another edition of CrossTalk. I'm Ian Dale and I'm on the right.
And I'm Yasmin Alibhai-Brown and I'm on the left.
And today our guest is Douglas Murray, who's the director of the Centre for Social Cohesion, an old friend of Yasmin's, because you had a bit of sparring on any questions a few weeks ago.
We were very nice to each other, weren't we?
I thought it was incredibly restrained.
We were very civilised
You were
and British
indeed.
about it.
Well, let's start in a civilised manner, even if it degenerates afterwards. But what is the Centre for Social Cohesion? What's its role in life?
The Centre is a new initiative set up by Civitas that many people will be familiar with as independent think tank. And the Centre's been set up through Civitas to deal really with one exclusive issue, which is community cohesion in Britain. Social cohesion in Britain, which is, after all, the sort of buzzword of the government and opposition these days. And specifically, therefore, we look into the particularly important area of our time, I think you'll agree, which is Islamic fundamentalism and activism in Britain. That's mainly what we focus on.
So, have you any Muslim friends?
Yeah.
Really good?
Yeah, lots.
And do you feel that if you describe your work in these terms, you are actually kind of putting the problem down to one section of the community?
No, my Muslim friends, I don't know about yours, mine are very, very keen, possibly keener than anyone else you'll meet, to get radicals out.
So if it's about radicals, why don't you just say, getting the radicals institute instead of the cohesion, which is a very benign and actually a much more subtle thing?
I don't think that getting the radicals out works as a title for things.
Well, you could be more honest, because I find it very disturbing, and I'm not necessarily talking only about you, that the cohesion debate is another kind of nice way of saying what to do about these bleeding Muslims.
You're saying we should just call it what to do about these bleeding Muslims.
Well, no,
that's your suggestion.
Call it what it is. Or, if it is about cohesion, then let's look at the wider problem. I think it was Max Hastings who wrote a very good piece about, I think 18 months ago, the most honest piece I've seen anybody on the right, which was, how many of us genuinely make the effort or have really close relationships with Muslims?
But I just said to you that
that's why I asked you. No, but what he was saying is it's all too easy to say it's them and it's never us. And if it is about cohesion, then it is both sides, isn't it, really? So are you working on that?
Well, hang on, you throw out too many things at the same time. First of all, you cite a good article by Max Hastings, which I haven't read.
No, well, I'm telling you what he said.
But secondly, I don't think the problem is many others. I think there is a particular problem, as I think you've acknowledged yourself in the past, with radical Muslims, not just in Britain, but across the globe. And it's much in the interests of their co-religionists, or the people whose faith they say they share, that they are identified and are given criticism, which I think is, you'd agree, the least that we should be expected to do. Now, as I say, many Muslims thank people for doing that and for making sure that we know who are practicing Muslims and who are decent, law-abiding Muslims, and who are people who use political Islam to further political aims. Max Hastings' point is not untrue. There is, of course, a problem in Britain whereby British identity has become so mellifluous or so hard to define that a lot of people wonder what they're integrating into. It was perfectly summed up recently when a Pakistani group in Scotland released a report the other week, which they sent to me, which said Pakistanis and Muslims in Scotland wish to integrate into Scotland stroke the UK, hope that Scottish stroke British identity. It's hard to say what you're going to integrate into when it itself seems to be splitting up. So I acknowledge you've got a point, or Max Hastings has a point.
And I don't want to integrate into some aspects of Britishness.
What wouldn't you want to integrate into?
I don't at all care for the intensely drink-based culture. It's not for me.
That's not British.
It is British, of course.
That's the site. One bad example of British culture cited as
my
being
choice.
typical.
Whether it's bad or good, I'm not
Yasmin,
saying.
nor do I. What's the relevance?
So, but when you say the British,
you identify British as binge drinkers?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Extraordinary generalisation about a whole racial
Yes, I do
group.
Actually, and that includes members of my own family who are more British than I am. So I have no qualm saying it at all. I can't tell you how many rows there are about that. There are many other aspects, of which, if you are saying there is...
What are the others, apart from that you think we're drinkers?
Well, I think that there are some fantastic carers of other family members in this country, but on the whole, I am shocked at how little people kind of intergenerationally, and there are historical reasons for this.
But what you're doing is citing the most negative aspects of a culture and saying that if you were to become part of that culture, you'd have to adopt them. That's like somebody saying, I'm not interested in Islam, I wouldn't want to become a Muslim because they're all suicide bombers.
I didn't say they were all.
I'm just saying that's the sort of... You're just doing from another side what a lot of people...
No, I'm saying, when you say, we talk about integration, it would be much healthier if we all said, look, we've all got problems actually. In Britain, there are myriad of problems, right? From
you don't think, surely, that hang on, you don't seriously think that drinking culture is equivalent to...
I think we have a serious drink culture and the problems that drags in Britain today. Yes, I do. I
quite like drink culture. I think it's quite good that people can go to the pub, and if they want to get drunk, they can get drunk, and if they don't, they don't.
I don't think the A&E departments, I don't think parents, I don't think even universities now think this is a wonderful thing. What I'm saying is, let's talk about making a Britain where lots of the problems can be collectively, Muslims, non-Muslims, so on. You know, we can find some solutions together. If you say, and Gordon Brown says this even more than people on the right, there is this thing called Britishness, and you must belong to it, then even somebody like me who's very well integrated, kind of, I don't want to.
But that's because you identify British culture as binge drinking and leaving people on their own.
No.
The two things you cited as British culture are binge drinking and leaving people on their own and not caring for them.
There were aspects of this culture I detest.
So
there are aspects of my culture I detest.
Why? You could cite some bits of British identity which you like.
I love the institutions.
There you go.
I love queuing.
Great.
I love the men so much. I've married one.
You love queuing?
Yes, I think it's a really good civilized way to do things.
I mean,
Northern Rock, any other country, they would have stormed. They queued up. I loved them for it. So all I'm saying is don't pretend there's this pristine thing called British culture, which everybody should belong to.
You make one important point, which is that all cultures have problems.
Yes.
I didn't deny that all cultures have problems. I don't think that drinking is as big a problem as you think it is.
Oh, I do.
But I possibly think that Islamic fanaticism is more serious than you think it is, because that's why I think we need to concentrate on it. I think it's a very serious problem. I don't think it's equivalent. I don't think it's equivalent to problems in other cultures.
We have nothing in common.
No, you have.
No,
You've got.
no
I
way.
I have read some of your recent articles, Yasmin, where you've been saying some things which Douglas could
No, but I come at it from a very different point of view.
You may come at it from a different point of view, but the end result of your writing is to recognise the problem.
Yes, and to give her credit, Yasmin has done that, and through a group that she's involved with, British Muslim Sacred Democracy, has acknowledged that on an institutional level, and I much congratulate her for getting there.
I was always there, long before you were. You should read some of my earlier books. But
what I tried.
What I can't buy into is the neocon agenda, which is yours. So describe it to us.
Hang on.
Describe it to us. Okay, let's not fight before you even told me. Describe it. Somebody's watching you. Tell them what your project is.
Hang on. What you're doing, and not very subtly eliding, is my own opinions about foreign policy and so on.
I want to know about it. That's why you're here.
The think tank which I work on, which I don't, after all, not all my colleagues are neoconservatives.
No, but we're also wanting to talk about
yes, but
your
if
position.
I can just make that transition, is to explain that just because the think tank I am director of deals with issues, we don't have a neocon agenda, and my left-wing colleagues and my Labour colleagues and so on would want me to say that as well.
Can we talk about what does it mean to be the only neocon in town or whatever?
In the village.
In the village.
The only neocon in the village, this is true. Look, being a neocon is...
There's Michael Gove, he's another one.
He's another. Yeah, there are small coterie.
now.
There are small coterie, and more are coming out from the left. We notice Andrew Anthony and so on. So look, being a neoconservative,
he'll be very upset you said that. I didn't say.
Well, being a neoconservative isn't a very fashionable thing to be these days. You'll have noticed, Yasmin. But it's not a political group. It's not a movement or anything else. All it is a way of looking at the world. And that way of looking at the world was identified many years ago by one of the sort of forefathers of neoconservatism, Irving Kristol, who defined neocons as being liberals who'd been mugged by reality. And I would say that fitted my own view of the world fairly well, is that I have believe it or not, Yasmin, a liberal outlook on the world, but I think that reality does mug you and has done so repeatedly in recent years. That's the perspective I come from. Those are the glasses I wear. I think in the same way it's mugged a lot of people, which is that they see that liberalism is a good thing and worth defending, but does not defend itself.
Which liberalism?
Classical liberalism. I mean classical liberalism. I mean the freedom of the individual and so on, which you must admit, to some extent, is under threat at the moment from all sorts of directions. But one of them, and we can at least agree on this, one of them is...
Why do you want to agree with me or make me agree with you? It's very good that we don't agree. Would you do your share? You're being paid for this interview.
I'm enjoying it.
Are you being paid for it? I'm not being paid for it.
It's my job to work here.
Would you do your job?
No, I'm enjoying this spectacle.
So are you on his side? Have you got questions?
We haven't actually let him, or you haven't let him, should I say, expound the theory of neoconservatism. Should we let him do that before we interrupt him?
As I was saying, there isn't a theory. It's just a way of looking at the world. It's an attitude. Like some people are instinctively conservative. Some people are instinctively small government conservative. Some people are conservatives who are sort of anarchist Tories. That's one view of the world. Then there are all the multiple views of the left. Neoconservatism is just another way of looking at the world.
And you believe in freedom of expression?
Yeah, very much so.
So you wouldn't mind if we had Osama bin Laden here on the programme?
No, I at least know which address he was at.
Well, supposing we did a secret interview and we allowed him to speak in the name of freedom of speech, would you allow it?
Well,
would you
do
applaud
broadcast Osama bin Laden on television every time he makes a speech. He gets quite good coverage, as I remember.
Al Jazeera mainly, but would you think that was a good idea?
No, and it's then repeated and every single newspaper publishes a transcript.
Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, of course.
So you are the ultimate freedom of speech.
Well,
so
I think that...
you?
I don't believe in absolute freedoms of speech.
There are some...
So you think Al Jazeera shouldn't show his videos?
There are some that I wouldn't have shown, yeah. I feel quite uncomfortable.
Where you think there might be some sort of signals to terrorists?
Yeah, and I also feel that Nazi propaganda shouldn't be shown on TV. I don't think racists should
nobody
get...
wants to
What about Jerry Adams? Because if you think, remember, in the 1980s, the Conservatives banned Jerry Adams' voice,
but he was an official spokesperson. He wasn't hiding in a cave.
But it actually was to his benefit that they did it.
Well, look, the freedom of speech issue doesn't really arise with that because they got their message out. All that happened was that somebody with an Irish accent ability voiced over them. So, I mean, it was as good as getting the message. So that wasn't censorship. Freedom of speech is an important thing. I'm very sorry that people don't defend it anymore. I'm particularly sorry when they won't defend people even for the small act of, for instance, drawing a cartoon or making a joke. I think it's very regrettable we've got to that stage. I think it's regrettable that we've got to the stage where the government is soon hoping to prosecute and send to prison somebody for making jokes about other people's religion. I think that's a serious point to have got to.
But why do you say people don't defend it when the whole world defended Salman Rushdie? The whole world
I don't remember that
rose.
it did.
Yes, it did.
I don't remember that it did.
The whole of the liberal community here.
No, they didn't. If you read back over the time...
I've got 3 boxes.
There you go.
I've got... it's
reopen them and you'll see that not only from the left, but from the right, we had people saying, most famously perhaps Lord Dacre, Hugh Trevor Roper, saying that it would be a good thing if Salman Rushdie was taken aside and taught some lessons to teach him for offending Islam. We get exactly the same thing now. There are people from right and left who say, if you lampoon someone's religion, make jokes about someone's religion, disrespect someone's religion, then you should have what's coming to you. And I don't believe that.
Do you?
What? No, I don't.
There's
but
nothing
I don't agree with
Douglas.
No
you see,
they all build up this mad conspiracy. They're
Hang on,
a mad conspiracy.
Hang on, who's they?
The neocons that you've defined. They build up this mad conspiracy that the whole world militates against these pure values. I agree with you that
there are regimes that
but
do.
There are people who have views.
Look
some
at
people
Burma,
disagree
look at North Korea,
with what
look at
Mr.
Iran.
Rushdie had done.
There's no freedom of speech in those countries,
absolutely.
Is there?
No. So what point are you making?
So they have a legitimate agenda to discuss these issues.
I didn't ask them not to. But if they want to discuss that issue, they can't expect everybody to fall in line with their agenda.
Well, I'm sure they don't.
No,
because when you say Lord Dacre, he disagreed. He disagreed with what the majority of the people said. That was his right. He wasn't killing Rushdie. He didn't take
I'll give you another example, perhaps closer to home, closer to our own day, which is Theo van Gogh, who, when he was slaughtered on the streets of Amsterdam, and his colleague, a great friend of mine, was chased out of the country for making a film. we had, among other things, Index on Censorship in Britain that ran a very prominent editorial saying it was right to censor Teo in that way.
And that was wrong.
And I'm saying that point of view, that was an extreme version of it. But that point of view is one I come across every day. I come across it not just among the Muslim community across Europe. I come across it from conservatives and others who think that it is permissible that if somebody deeply offends someone else's beliefs, they should have what's coming to them. And I disagree with that.
Well,
and I think if you are willing to, well, you see, you started off by saying something different, which was that this is a freedom of speech.
Are you not capable of subtlety at all, Douglas? Why don't you just listen? Why don't you listen to my words instead of saying, I disagree with that?
Your first point, such as it was that Osama bin Laden would be the obvious equivalent to make of this. I don't think that is an obvious equivalent to make of this. And I don't think there's a problem with showing Osama bin Laden to the criticism of other people's religions. And I don't think that Osama bin Laden...
I didn't say that at all.
But you did say that you didn't think that Osama bin Laden should be shown.
I really think you should listen to what I'm saying.
You did say that there were times you shouldn't show
there are limits to absolute freedom for me.
Where do they land?
I would never allow Nazis onto our television screens to say what they think about Jewish people. I just wouldn't.
And how do you form that? Who forms that judgment? Is there some little elite panel somewhere?
I think we as societies have to form that judgment, and we have a law in Europe about denial of the Holocaust.
You make martyrs of people. I mean, David Irving, for example. I mean, he's the ultimate example of this. David Irving makes himself look a fool every time he denies the Holocaust.
Yeah. But imprisoning him, importantly, imprisoning him for denying the Holocaust has given the Iranian madman Ahmadinejad the opportunity to berate the West by saying, you see, you talk about freedom of speech, but then you imprison David Irving. So you give Ahmadinejad a point.
No,
You've got to go quite far to give him one.
That's the law of the jungle. You can say whatever you like. Let's
move on to Iran, because unless I've misunderstood the concept of neoconservatism, it thinks that action has to be taken against countries like Iran and North Korea before they become a real problem. And so a lot of Richard Pearl, for example, various other neocons in Washington have advocated taking military action now against Iran because they see it as a huge threat to international stability. Is that something you would go along with?
I think that there's a very simple way of looking at this, which a number of other people do in Washington and elsewhere, and Paris now, of course, I'm glad to say, which is that they recognize that the problem we face with Iran is simple. Do you or do you not think that it would be tolerable for us to face a nuclear-armed Iran? I think the answer is no. Then the only question is, what are you going to do about it? If you think we do nothing about it, you acquiesce in Tehran getting a nuclear bomb. You also acquiesce not just in that country getting a bomb, the nuclear bomb, but in a nuclear arms race across the Middle East that makes a mockery of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and which means that the most volatile region in the world is armed with the most dangerous weapons. That's what the price of inaction is.
Do you think we should be part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty?
Well, hang on. You're
I'm asking your question. Don't analyse my question. Answer it if you can. If not, it's fine. If it's too hard, don't answer.
I think that Britain has the right to possess nuclear weapons.
So we're exempt, as ever?
No. I think that there is a difference between this country and a country run by a dictator called Ahmadinejad and a clerical theocracy. I think there's a big difference there. Do you acknowledge that difference or not?
I don't think we can have more nuclear weapons and tell anyone in the world that
if
they have to live by those
rules.
If
we have Nazi Germany, if they had the ability to get nuclear weapons in the 1930s...
I think nobody should have them, and we should be completely going...
Okay.
Absolutely,
haven't we been there 20 years ago? And that
argument
absolutely.
The argument's
we're coming
dead.
back to it now, because Pakistan has them, because Iran has it.
Which makes
hang on, well, Iran doesn't have it.
You can't carry on with your Western arrogance and say, oh, we must have more.
It's not to do with Western arrogance, it's actually holding a point of view.
No, it's a Western arrogance which says...
Some of us believe in multilateralism rather than unilateralism. No. Unilateralism over any period in history has never worked. Give me an example of where unilateralism has worked, where one state has given up its weapons and everybody else has followed suit. Never happened.
We now live in a globalized world. It isn't one country saying, I'm going to give it up.
Which makes multilateralism
Everybody's got
even
to
more
sit around the
important.
table.
How likely,
because otherwise we're going to destroy the world.
How likely is it that everyone's going to sit around and give up their nuclear weapons?
It's
not likely at all. So we might as well just
go bomb Iran. Because you didn't do so well in Iraq. Just go bomb Iran.
No,
go to another playground.
If you were yourself capable of subtlety, you'd understand that it's more important to stop the nuclear arming of the mullahs of Tehran than to make some kind of global across-the-board equivalence, which means that we treat Britain and the theocracy in Iran as being moral equals, which is what you've just done.
We cannot justify increasing our nuclear arsenal and ask any other country to stop and think about what they're doing. That seems to me lesson number one.
You seem to be, among other things, unable to acknowledge that Britain's nuclear armaments are owned by and run by people who have, let's just say, moral legitimacy for the time being.
After Iraq, I don't think we have moral legitimacy.
Look,
I'm sorry, we don't.
Well, okay, that's your view, but what I do think is that you would at least, if you had any decency about this question, acknowledge there is a difference between Gordon Brown and Mr. Ahmadinejad. Are you capable of acknowledging that?
Yes.
Right.
But I don't want Gordon Brown to increase our nuclear arsenal.
You want him to keep it just as it is?
Completely, yes.
No, she wants him
to get rid of it. That's the real...
At least let's not go down the route of increasing the arsenal. That's the first thing.
Let me put something to you that I think Yasmin will probably have some sympathy with. Iran is actually, I've never been there, but everyone that I know that has been there tells me that the society is actually quite westernised, that they're quite sort of favourably disposed towards the West, but they have this sort of peculiar dual political system where the people don't actually really have much say. Aren't threats like the ones that you're backing going to alienate the people of Iran where they would support some kind of nuclear build-up by their leaders, which at the moment they may not?
One of the things you can get most Iranian people to agree on is their right to nuclear power of some kind. Whether they also believe that they should have a nuclear weapon is to one extent immaterial, because the following is the case, that if, as most authorities believe, we are about 2 years away from a nuclear-armed Iran, and quite probably less on the current time scale, we have to hope that some kind of democratic underground in Iran comes about before that. I don't think that is likely in that time. I sincerely hope, as I think all people do, that there's a democratic revolution in Iran and that the mullahs are no longer able to hold their hands around the throat of that country. But I don't think, and don't know of anyone who does, that the egg timer of democratic reform comes about before the nuclear bomb is achieved. So at that point it becomes academic anyway, which is that you have this backward regime in Tehran which is armed with a nuclear device, which can blackmail its neighbours and cause a nuclear run across the Middle East. And you have that going on.
So the logic of...
whether it was, I mean, just to finish that point, is it more or less likely in that situation that the mullahs have a greater hold or a lesser hold over their country?
I understand the logic, but the consequent logic of that is that within the next 2 years you are advocating that America or possibly Israel bombs the nuclear facilities in Iran.
Of course.
What do you mean, of course?
And what would be the consequences of that?
Terrible.
So you will sacrifice the people in the name of democracy?
No, I haven't actually mentioned democracy for a bit, but we could get back to discussing it. What I was saying was that I wasn't making this argument for democratic purposes. I was saying to make sure they don't get a nuclear bomb.
You said
to make sure that they don't get. To make sure they
sorry,
don't.
I have to talk. You said in 2 years you were hoping for a democracy.
I did not. So what I did not say is that I am advocating the bombing of Iran because of democratic reasons. What I'm saying is that the bombing of Iran will end up being necessary because every step necessary has to be taken to stop the mullahs being in charge of a nuclear device. So
America or whoever bombs the nuclear facilities. What happens after that?
Iran tries to lash out in every way it knows best and in a time-honoured fashion.
And there's a third world war.
I don't think it would lead to a third world war. I think that there are many countries.
To Israel?
Well, there are many countries in the region, not least I think Saudi, that would thank us for stopping Iran from becoming a nuclear power.
I doubt they would thank you for dropping
Dropping what?
The kind of bombs that you're envisaging and America wants. Even Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia is in the pockets of the West,
there are not very many countries in the region that want to see a nuclear arms race and destabilize Middle East with nuclear weapons across every border. The other reason,
Israel can have them.
The inevitable equivalence has now been made.
Yes,
which is between the theocracy in Tehran and the democratic state of Israel.
I see. Which does what it wants and will.
I think, with respect, that there's a difference between the state of Israel, which sits pretty much alone in the Middle East, and the state of Iran, which is a theocracy which runs, I'm sure even you wouldn't defend the human rights record of Iran or anything else, but you would recognise the difference between the state of Israel and the state of Iran. Now,
yes, I do actually. In terms of having nuclear weapons, if one state, and a state that often behaves malevolently and in a maverick fashion, has the weapons, we already have a very dangerous situation. Whether it's a democracy or not, it doesn't matter.
Israel's nuclear capability has, among other things, ensured its survival in recent decades. A survival which is not hoped for by any of the countries that surround it, and which are its enemies, and which bomb it daily from the Gaza.
Do you not think that would be exacerbated by the bombing of Iran?
Israel faces an existential threat. The leader of Iran has made it clear that he would like to see the end of Israel, the wiping of it off the map, the pushing of the Jews into the sea. He denies the last Holocaust and has expressed an interest in starting the next one. Now, Yasmin may think that that means that you should give that man a bomb. I think he should not get a bomb.
No, I don't think he should have a bomb. I do not think that in the interest... That's what I think.
I do not think that in the interest... That is what I think. You made it clear by pointing at me and shouting.
I will say to you again, ABC, I do not want Iran to have the bomb, and I do not want Israel to have them either.
This is a null and void statement to make, because what you mean by saying that is that if Israel were disarmed, you would like Israel to be disarmed.
Yes,
if Israel were disarmed, Israel would stop existing. Therefore,
right.
that is a simple case. There ain't much love shown from Tehran to Israel these days. There isn't much love shown from Damascus to Israel, or ever has been. What you are acknowledging, or what you would acknowledge if you're honest about this, is that you don't mind the fact that there's an existential threat to the face of Israel, and that Israel faces being wiped off the map.
I was
you're
10 years old.
Not supporting Israel. You're a phony
but
friend
I
of
do
Israel.
not agree
You're not
with
a
it.
friend of
No,
Israel.
I do not want it to have a nuclear weapons.
You don't want it to survive then. You don't want it to survive then.
What's more,
you don't want it to survive. That's what's perfectly clear. Oh, enlightened Jewish people. Enlightened Jewish people. You see, now you seem to think that the only people who are enlightened are people who think like you. Well, thank God they're not.
Yes.
The enlightened people are people who disagree with you on this one. I think that when Israel has an existential threat, you do not decide that moral equivalence should be exercised. You do not decide that in the interests of moral equivalence between a dictatorship and a democracy, that you allow the people of Israel and the state of Israel to be wiped off the map. That isn't moral judgment, that's insanity.
They are mad, these neocons.
There you go.
They are certified mad. They are mad. They really are crazy.
How to wipe out Israel? How to wipe out Israel whilst pretending to be a friend of Israel?
There,
you've just seen a demonstration of
what
it.
you need, boy.
You see, just as it gets going, we have to finish the programme. What a shame. Thank you very much for joining us, Douglas.
No, it's great.
I'm so glad there are only about 6 neocons left in the UK.
It's been a period of enlightenment, I would say, Yasmin, wouldn't you? That's all for this week. Join us again next week for another edition of CrossTalk. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye-bye.